It was supposed to be an ordinary Saturday. A calm morning, the kind we used to look forward to when life felt safe. The town square buzzed with laughter and chatter as locals gathered at the weekend farmers market. My daughters, Chloe and Lily, wandered the stalls with a shopping list and a little spending money. It was Lily's birthday, and this was her favorite tradition, picking out homemade jam and fresh sunflowers to brighten her room. I stayed back at the cafe on the corner, sipping a cappuccino, smiling at how they'd finally begun smiling again. It had been a brutal year, the kind that rearranges your entire soul. 8 months ago, my ex-husband, David Connors, died in a boating accident off the Oregon coast. He was 49. But that wasn't what tore us apart. 3 weeks before his death, I had filed for divorce after discovering his hidden life, an affair that had lasted nearly 5 years. The other woman, Ava, lived just one town over. They shared 2 children, twin girls. His entire double life collapsed into the public eye the day the accident claimed both their lives. The betrayal was still fresh when the demands from David's family began. His mother, Beatrice, and sister Rachel insisted that my daughters connect with their half-sisters, as if everything was normal. Chloe and Lily were clear. They needed space. They weren't ready. But their refusal was met not with compassion, but with judgment. And today, that judgment escalated into an ambush. The call came from Lily. Her voice trembled. "Mom, they're here. Grandma's church ladies. They won't let us leave." I ran. I crossed the square in seconds, weaving past crowds and tables. And then I saw it. 6 older women in pastel coats and pearl earrings, surrounding my daughters like a tribunal. Chloe stood in front of Lily, shielding her, her fists clenched at her sides. "You girls are a shame to your father's memory," one of the women hissed. "Heartless little brats, turning your backs on family." Another added, "Your grandmother gave everything to you, and this is how you repay her?" They didn't notice me at first. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I stepped forward, calm, deliberate, and said only 2 words, "Thank you." The women blinked, confused. Then I looked at Chloe and Lily and said, "We're leaving." One of the women, someone I vaguely recognized from church potlucks years ago, scoffed. "Of course, walk away, just like your mother taught you." That one hit me. But I didn't let it show. I placed my hand on Lily's shoulder and guided them through the circle. None of the women moved to stop us this time. But their eyes burned with judgment. We were asked to leave the market altogether. Not because we caused trouble, but because no one wanted a scene. I didn't argue. I got my daughters into the car and drove off. But something inside me had shifted. This was no longer about grief. It wasn't about family. This was a campaign, a coordinated one. One that used church gossip, whispered half-truths, and guilt like weapons. That night, I tucked Lily into bed. She didn't ask about what happened, but I could see the fear in her eyes, the fear that she was the problem. Chloe sat silently at the kitchen table, staring at her tea. "They really hate us." She finally said, "No," I replied. "They hate that you won't play along." After they went to bed, I poured a glass of wine and opened my laptop. I logged into Facebook. There it was, a post on the private page of Beatrice's church circle. A prayer request. Except it wasn't a prayer. It was a declaration. "She has locked us out of our grandchildren's lives," Beatrice had written. "We offered love, she returned cruelty. My son's poor daughters have turned cold. They mock their late father's memory, and all because their bitter mother poisoned their hearts." She claimed David had fathered the twins via surrogacy. That I was infertile. That I was jealous of the children who should have been mine. A story so warped I had to read it 3 times. And the comments. Dozens of them. Support, outrage, sympathy. None of them knew the truth, but I did. And I had proof. I opened the drawer where I kept my old flash drive, the one I used to collect evidence for the divorce. I'd nearly forgotten it, but I had never deleted it. There were emails, messages, photos, texts between David and Ava, planning holidays behind my back, bank transfers, conversations between David and his mother, where she encouraged him to ease the girls into the idea of new siblings, and audio, voicemails, one of Beatrice blaming Lily for David's death, another of Rachel saying Chloe was just like her mother, manipulative and selfish. I stared at the files. I wasn't afraid anymore. They wanted to tell their story? Fine. But I was going to tell the truth. And that's how the real battle began. The air in Ridgeville felt heavier the next day, as if the town itself knew something had shifted. I brewed coffee at dawn, staring out the kitchen window while Chloe and Lily slept. Their backpacks were lined up neatly near the door, a sign that despite everything, they were still trying to hold on to normalcy. I wasn't sure how to tell them I'd spent half the night reading a Facebook post from Beatrice Connors that would make Satan blush. Disguised as a prayer request, her 900-word rant painted us as heartless traitors who had rejected family, ignored two poor orphaned boys, David's sons from the affair, and claimed I had manipulated my daughters into harboring hatred for God's plan. Her lies were elaborate, almost artistic. According to her, the boys were born through surrogacy because I couldn't bear children. That wasn't just a lie. It was a knife to the throat. What she didn't expect. I still had everything. Documents, screenshots, voicemails, the receipts. At 9 a.m., I made a call to my boss and took a personal day. Then I pulled out an old plastic bin from the attic, labeled simply, Divorce Backup. Inside were manila folders, a hard drive, and a thumb drive with a pink star sticker, Chloe's from when she was 10. The irony almost made me laugh. I started organizing the files like I was building a war chest. Screenshots of David's texts to his mistress, hotel receipts, secret bank transfers, pictures of them kissing in our backyard, taken the same day he had promised to take Chloe to a college fair. The betrayal was layered like sediment. Then came the voicemails. One from Beatrice, 3 days after David's death. Her voice cracked not with grief, but fury. "You selfish bitch," she spat into the phone. "If you hadn't poisoned those girls against him, David would still be alive. This is on you." Then there was Henry, David's father. Drunk, rambling, calling my daughters ungrateful heathens and spiteful little devils. I hadn't shared these with the girls. Not yet. But maybe now was the time. I spent the next few hours scanning everything, labeling folders, backing up the thumb drive. My kitchen looked like a crime scene. By noon, I stood at Ridgeville Print and Copy, handing over a flash drive to a teenager with piercings and green hair. "Full color," I said. "Front and back, bound, 10 copies. He scrolled through the files, his eyebrows lifting. These are personal?" "Extremely," I said. "Think church bulletin meets court evidence." I drove straight to the craft store afterward and picked out 10 navy blue binders, gold stickers, and a pack of cream-colored cardstock. I wanted elegance, class. I wanted these women to open the covers thinking it was a church newsletter, only to be hit with the truth. Back home, I worked through the evening. Each binder started with a photo. David and his mistress, Leah, kissing on our front porch. My daughter's drawings taped to the door behind them. I titled the page, "David and Leah, The Real Story." Each chapter was brutal. Emails about covering up the affair, texts to his parents about softening the girls to accept new siblings, therapy notes describing how Chloe blamed herself for the divorce. I didn't just include screenshots. I explained the timeline, documented the pain. I told our story. By midnight, I lined the binders on the counter like little soldiers. I didn't cry. I didn't tremble. I felt prepared. Sunday morning came. I dressed in black jeans and a gray cardigan. Unassuming. Forgettable. I arrived at Ridgeville Grace Fellowship 5 minutes before the 10 a.m. service. It was the same church where we had held David's funeral. The same pews where people cried crocodile tears while whispering judgment behind our backs. No one stopped me as I entered. I slipped a binder under every pew's hymnal slot. 10 in total. Then I walked out before the choir finished its opening verse. By noon, Facebook was ablaze, posts disappearing, screenshots appearing in their place. Someone had snapped a photo of the binder's first page and uploaded it with the caption, "Truth at the Altar." At 3 p.m., I got a text from Rachel Connors, David's sister. She'd said nothing since the funeral. "Rachel, I don't agree with how you did it, but I read it, and damn." I didn't reply. That evening, Chloe walked into the kitchen with her phone in hand. "Mom," she asked quietly, "did you make those binders?" I hesitated. "Yes." She nodded, her face unreadable. Then slowly she smiled. "Good." Later that night, as Lily brushed her teeth and Chloe braided her own hair in front of the mirror, I watched them from the hallway. Not broken, not fragile, resilient. They didn't ask for this war, but they'd survived the first strike. And now? Now it was my turn to win it. By Monday morning, Ridgeville was in full meltdown. I hadn't planned to monitor the chaos, but it was impossible to avoid. My phone pinged nonstop. Facebook messages, texts from numbers I didn't recognize, emails from people who once ghosted me at the PTA. Some were apologizing. Others were angry. And a few, those rare few, had the nerve to both sides the whole situation. "You shouldn't have embarrassed the church like that," one message read. "There were better ways to handle it." Better ways? Really? Tell that to my daughters, who were cornered at the Saturday market and verbally assaulted like they were witches in Salem. But amidst the storm of opinions, something shifted. For the first time since David's death, people started asking real questions. About Beatrice, about Henry, about the lies. I stayed quiet. I didn't respond. I let the truth do what truth does best. That afternoon, while Chloe was at soccer practice and Lily finished up a science project, I received a call from someone I hadn't heard from in over a year. Caleb Foster. Caleb was one of the few people from our former church I'd actually respected. He taught Sunday school for teens, played guitar in the worship band, and once helped David fix a broken sink without charging a dime. "Kira," he said, voice low, cautious, "I just wanted you to know, people are talking. About what happened. About the binders." "Let me guess," I said. "I'm the villain of the week?" "Actually, no. Not this time. You opened some eyes." That surprised me. Pastor Mitchell had to shut down the church Facebook group. There were arguments, big ones. Deaconess Loretta accused Beatrice of manipulating the congregation. A few families are threatening to leave. I let the silence stretch. "Why are you really calling, Caleb?" he sighed. "Because some of us want to do the right thing. And also, because Beatrice isn't done." My shoulders stiffened. "What do you mean?" "She's been calling people. Trying to recruit character witnesses. Saying you're unstable. Saying the girls are being turned into atheists." I laughed, bitter and sharp. "Because we stopped praying with the woman who called my daughters heathens? That's not atheism. That's survival." He didn't argue. "She's trying to file for custody, isn't she?" "Yes, and she's not doing it quietly." I ended the call with a polite thank you, then stood in the middle of my kitchen, fists clenched at my sides. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I grabbed my laptop, opened the folder labeled Defense, and began building our fortress. Emails, voicemails, counseling summaries, photos of Chloe's bruised shins from soccer games. Beatrice never showed up to. Lily's report cards. Witness statements from their school counselor. By the time Chloe got home, the table was covered in paper. She stared at it, then at me. "Mom, what's going on?" I paused, debating whether to tell her everything. "They're trying to take you away from me," I said quietly. Chloe's jaw tensed. "Beatrice?" I nodded. Lily appeared in the doorway, holding her sketchpad. "Can she do that?" "She's gonna try," I said, "but we're gonna stop her. Together." The next day I met with my lawyer, Angela. She was sharp, strategic, and didn't waste time with pleasantries. "We'll file a motion to dismiss and a protective order," she said. "You already have overwhelming evidence." "But will it be enough?" I asked. Angela looked at me over her glasses. "You're a stable, full-time mother. Your kids are thriving in school. You've got zero history of abuse or neglect. Beatrice has voicemails calling them monsters." "Yeah, it's enough," I exhaled. "I want to be aggressive," I said. "I want this over before it becomes a media circus." Angela raised an eyebrow. "Too late." She turned her laptop around. An article was trending locally. "Church scandal in Ridgeville. Grandmother seeks custody after family feud." They had blurred names, but everyone in town could read between the lines. I leaned back in the chair, heart pounding. "What happens now?" I asked. Angela folded her hands. "Now we fight smart, and we fight loud." By Friday, the subpoena arrived, tucked in a vanilla envelope like it wasn't a loaded weapon. Beatrice and Henry Jennings were formally filing for emergency custody of Chloe and Lily. Emergency. As if our home was a danger. As if I were unstable. As if these girls who had lost their father and endured the humiliation of betrayal needed to be rescued by the very people who blamed them for it all. Lily cried when I told her. Chloe didn't. She just said, "Let's end it." That night, I sat on the living room floor with both girls, sorting through every shred of evidence. I handed Chloe the binder, the one with the photo of David and Leah kissing behind her crayon drawings, and asked, "Are you sure you're okay with this being in court?" She nodded. "It's ugly, but it's ours." And then, for the first time in months, I slept. Not because I was at peace, but because I was ready. Ready to burn it all down if I had to. The day of the custody hearing arrived, and Ridgeville was drenched in cold spring rain. Gray skies, wet sidewalks, and the smell of pine and storm clouds. A fitting backdrop, I thought. Stormy skies for a stormy reckoning. I stood on the courthouse steps in a navy blazer, hair tied back tight, a folder tucked beneath my arm. Beside me, Chloe adjusted the collar of her blouse and took a deep breath. Lily, wearing her black flats, and the same necklace her father had given her before everything fell apart, held my hand tightly. "You ready?" I asked. "No," Chloe answered honestly, "but we're here." Inside the courtroom, Beatrice and Henry Jennings were already seated with their attorney, a man who looked like he billed by the hour and judged people by their shoes. Beatrice wore a pale lavender suit and pearls, the picture of false humility. Henry sat stiffly beside her, saying nothing. They didn't even look at us. I'd expected drama, gasps, outbursts, maybe even theatrics. But they were playing the game differently now. This time they wanted to look like victims. Their lawyer opened the hearing with a somber tone, painting a picture of heartbroken grandparents desperate to preserve the family legacy. He claimed I had isolated the girls, that I had warped their perception of family, and denied Beatrice a rightful relationship with her granddaughters. "Miss Evans has created an environment of hostility," he declared. "These girls are grieving, and instead of healing within their extended family, they've been manipulated into bitterness." I clenched my jaw so tightly I thought it might crack. Then it was our turn. Angela stood, her presence cool and commanding. "Your Honor," she began, "what you're about to hear is not speculation. It's not conjecture. It's fact. Documented, recorded, and verified. And it will make clear that this custody petition is not about love or concern. It's about power, about control." She presented our binder of evidence methodically. Voicemails from Beatrice, laced with cruelty. Social media posts shaming my daughters publicly. Text messages blaming Chloe and Lily for their father's death. Gasps rippled through the courtroom as one of Beatrice's own voice messages played on the speaker. "You two little monsters destroyed your father. You'll regret this one day. You'll burn for what you've done." Beatrice flinched. Henry dropped his eyes. Angela let the silence stretch, then calmly added, "And this is who they want to raise two teenage girls." Then came the photographs. David and Leah in our home. Affectionate, familiar. The affair laid bare. I didn't enjoy it. This wasn't revenge. This was necessary. The judge flipped through the binder slowly, her expression unwritable. Then she looked at me. "Miss Evans, do you have anything to add?" I stood. My hands were steady. "Yes, Your Honor. Just one thing." I turned to Chloe and Lily, then back to the bench. "My daughters have lost enough. Their father lied to them. He lied to me. And since his death, they've been harassed, shamed, and publicly vilified by the very people claiming to love them. We are not perfect, but we are healing, together, and I will not allow anyone to take that from us." The judge nodded once, then leaned forward. "Chloe, Lily, do you wish to speak?" Chloe rose first. Her voice was clear. "We were never asked how we felt, not once. They talk about love, but they only ever talked at us, not to us. We don't want to live with them. We don't want visits. We want peace." Lily followed, her voice quieter but firm. "I still have nightmares, of being called evil, of being told we were a mistake. That's not family." Then came the ruling. This court finds no grounds for emergency custody. In fact, the petition itself is troubling given the evidence of psychological harassment. Therefore, I'm not only denying the request, but I'm also issuing a protective order. Beatrice and Henry Jennings are to have no contact, direct or indirect, with Chloe or Lily Evans for a minimum of 12 months. Beatrice gasped. Henry looked away. The judge turned to me. "Miss Evans, I commend you for your preparation, your poise, and most of all, your protection of your children." It was over. As we exited the courthouse, Chloe reached for my hand. "You did it," she said. "No," I replied. "We did." Outside, a small cluster of reporters waited. Not many, just enough to make you feel like the world was watching. One of them asked if I had a comment. "Yes," I said. "Protecting your children is not spite, it's parenting. And no amount of guilt or grief excuses cruelty." We didn't stay for more questions. We drove home in silence, the rain easing into a soft drizzle. When we walked through the front door, the girls headed upstairs. I poured a cup of coffee and stood at the kitchen window, watching the garden that Chloe had helped me plant finally begin to bloom. It felt like closure. Until the letter came. 2 days later, delivered by hand. Cream envelope. Elegant script. No apology, just manipulation disguised as sorrow. I pray one day you will allow us back into the girls' lives. Family is all we have. I folded it, placed it in the documentation file, locked the drawer. No response. No second chances. Because this wasn't just about winning a case. It was about building a wall high enough that they'd never get the chance to hurt us again. It took about 3 weeks before the silence started to feel real. No more anonymous letters in the mailbox. No cold stares at the grocery store. No more whispered conversations outside Lily's school pickup line. Just stillness. Uneasy, unfamiliar, but stillness nonetheless. The court order had done what logic and basic decency couldn't. It shut Beatrice and Henry down completely. Officially, they were barred from all contact with Chloe and Lily for 1 year, with a pending review for extension. But I knew better. They weren't surrendering. They were retreating, waiting, plotting their next move in the shadows, like they always did. But this time, we were ready. Chloe began therapy again, with a renewed sense of purpose. One morning, I heard her say to her therapist, "I need to understand why I froze at the market. I want to figure out how not to feel small the next time someone attacks us." She wasn't running from the trauma anymore. She was studying it, learning from it. Lily, ever the quiet one, started writing again. Pages and pages of poetry in a floral notebook she kept tucked beneath her pillow. I never read it, but sometimes I caught glimpses of lines. She called me broken. But I'm still here. You don't heal by pretending it didn't hurt. As for me, I was starting to sleep through the night. I no longer kept my phone under the pillow, waiting for the next explosion. I started cooking again, actual meals, not frozen pizza or microwaved leftovers. I played music while folding laundry. I caught myself humming. That was when I knew something had shifted. Not just surviving, living. Then came the letter. It was delivered mid-morning on a Tuesday. Cream stationery, slanted cursive, Beatrice's handwriting. I didn't open it right away. I made tea. I let it sit on the counter. Then when the kettle cooled, I read it. There was no apology, just a performance. She wrote about loss, about how her son's death had shattered her world, how the community had turned against her without cause, how she hoped one day forgiveness would replace resentment. She never acknowledged the things she said, the lies, the court case, the way she'd tried to rip 2 teenage girls from the only home they had left. Instead, in the final paragraph she wrote, "I pray one day you'll allow us back into the girls' lives. Family is all we have." I folded the letter neatly, slipped it into a folder labeled documentation, and walked away. I had nothing left to say. Later that week, I got a call from Caleb, the only person from that church who had dared to tell the truth during the custody hearing. "The boards asked Pastor Mitchell to step down," he said. I blinked. "Wait, really?" "Yep. Turns out too many people were upset about how everything was handled, about how Elaine's lies spread without question. They're calling it a change of leadership. Some are even leaving the church entirely." I didn't say anything. I wasn't sure what to feel. Caleb continued. "Some of us were wondering, would you ever consider coming back, or maybe meeting with some of the women? Rebuilding." The question sat heavy in the air between us. "No," I said finally. "Some bridges aren't meant to be rebuilt." There was a pause, and then softly, Caleb replied, "I figured you'd say that. And honestly, I respect it." The next Saturday, Chloe came downstairs holding a cardboard box from the attic. Inside were old family photos, back when things looked normal, back when I thought they were. She pulled out one in particular, all 4 of us at the lake. David had his arms around both girls, the sun glowing behind them like a halo. "I remember this day," she said. "Me too. Do you want to keep these?" I looked at the photo, at the lie it represented, then at the daughters who survived it. "No," I said softly. "I want to remember who we are now, not who we were pretending to be." She nodded and set the box aside. That same evening, Natalie, one of Lily's friends from school, came over for dinner. It had been months since we'd had company. We laughed, ate tacos, played cards at the kitchen table until Lily couldn't stop giggling and Chloe was mock pouting about losing. After they left, Lily turned to me and said, "It doesn't feel like war anymore." No, I agreed. It feels like freedom. By Monday, the church had officially shut down its Facebook group. Elaine and Henry never returned to their usual pews. Whispers said they were considering a fresh start somewhere in Washington. Somewhere they could reinvent the story. But I didn't care. We weren't hiding anymore. We weren't looking back. We were building something better than peace. We were building truth. The kind of truth that doesn't whisper or apologize. The kind that stands up, takes the mic, and tells its own story. 1 year to the day after the court's ruling, I stood on a small stage in a modest community center, heart pounding, hands cool against the wood of the podium. The folding chairs in the auditorium were filled with faces, mothers, fathers, a few teenagers, even a pair of elderly grandparents. I was there to speak at a forum for single parents navigating custody battles and toxic in-laws. I wasn't sure why I said yes. Public speaking had never been my thing, but something about this felt right. When the host introduced me, I stepped forward slowly. A hush fell over the room. "I'm Julia Evans," I began, voice steady. And for a long time I thought staying silent was the mature thing to do. I thought if I kept the peace, my daughters would be okay. But silence isn't peace. Sometimes silence is permission, and I won't give that to anyone ever again. For the next 20 minutes, I told our story. Not the dramatized version, not the court transcript, just the truth. The grief, the betrayal, the moment my daughters were surrounded by women from a church who should have protected them, and how we fought back. Not with vengeance, but with truth. Not to destroy, but to defend. When I finished, 3 women came up to me in tears. One whispered, "I thought I was alone." I took her hand gently and told her what I had learned the hard way. "You're not alone. You just haven't spoken loud enough for your people to find you." That night, when I returned home, Chloe and Lily were baking brownies. The kitchen smelled like melted chocolate and cinnamon, Chloe's favorite combo. Lily danced around in her socks, humming something offbeat, while Chloe pretended not to enjoy it. It wasn't perfect. We were still healing. But healing is messy. It's late-night baking and early morning tears. It's talking about the hard stuff. It's letting go of the people who never deserved to stay. After dessert, Chloe raised her glass of milk. "To survival." I smiled. "No, to something better." Lily leaned in, glass held high, to truth. We clinked our glasses together. For the first time in what felt like forever, I laughed without guilt. The next morning brought another surprise. A letter, handwritten, no return address. But I knew the handwriting immediately. Beatrice Connors. I hadn't heard from her in nearly 6 months. She and Henry had vanished from our lives after the restraining order was extended. No more court filings, no more social media campaigns, just silence. I opened the letter at the kitchen table. It was short. "Julia, we lost a lot this year. More than I can explain. I hope one day you'll find it in your heart to let us be part of the girls' lives again. Family is all we have left. Beatrice." There was no apology, no responsibility, no mention of the lies, the harassment, the attempt to take my daughters away. Just the same old performance. She had lost control, and now she was framing herself as the victim again. I folded the letter, slid it into a folder labeled unsentimental. Then I picked up my phone and texted my lawyer. "Received another letter from Beatrice? No contact violation?" She replied within minutes. "As long as it doesn't reference the girls directly or contain threats, we won't pursue it. But keep it, just in case, I would." I kept everything. Later that afternoon, Caleb called. Again. "She's left the church," he said. "Resigned her membership quietly. Henry, too." "That's unexpected," I replied. "She didn't really have a choice. The board has been under pressure since everything came out. Too many families left. Too many questions they couldn't answer." I didn't feel joy, not really. Just closure. "Also," Caleb added, "the new pastor's trying to make amends, that they're hosting a series on community healing. Some people are hoping you'll speak again." "I appreciate that," I said gently. "But some places aren't meant to be returned to. Some wounds don't heal by reopening them." Caleb didn't push. He just said, "For what it's worth, Julia, your story changed things." I hung up and stood quietly in the living room. Chloe and Lily were in their rooms doing homework. Outside, a soft spring breeze carried the scent of wildflowers through the open window. Our garden had started to bloom. Bright marigolds and purple lavender lined the backyard fence. Tomatoes were sprouting, and a small row of sunflowers had started reaching for the sky. The space that once felt haunted now felt like hope. I slipped on my sandals and stepped outside, barefoot on the dewy grass. I walked past the marigolds and knelt by the herb bed, gently brushing my fingers along the rosemary. That garden had started as a promise to Luke. But somewhere along the way, it had become something bigger. A testament not to the man he was, but to the women we had become. Not victims, not survivors, builders, bloomers, women who refused to let pain define them. I looked up at the house, ours. Not a monument to betrayal, but a sanctuary of truth. One final letter arrived 2 weeks later. This one was from Stephanie Connors, Beatrice's daughter, my ex-sister-in-law. She wrote, "Julia, I don't expect forgiveness, but I need to tell you something. I knew. I knew about Leah, about the affair. I never spoke up. I wanted to believe it wasn't my place. But really, I was afraid. And when it all fell apart, I let Mom pull me into her bitterness. I stood by while she tried to rip your family apart. I'm so sorry. I've started therapy. I'm working to change. If the girls ever want to reach out, I'd be grateful. But if not, I'll understand. Sincerely, Stephanie." I reread it several times. This time, I didn't file it away. I didn't burn it. I left it on the table. When Chloe saw it, she asked quietly, "Do you believe her?" "I believe she's trying," I said, "and sometimes that's the best we can do." Lily didn't say anything, but later that night, I found her in the garden, trimming dead leaves off the sunflowers. She looked up and whispered, "They're still growing." And I knew she wasn't just talking about the flowers.